Hey Emma, are you ever going to be able to make a video about post-Harry Potter content without making it an hour long? Hey, what's up, hello? My name is Emma, and today I am giving you guys my review of the film Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. I'm going to put the disclaimer here that this is probably going to be one of the more unpopular opinion reviews of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, because while I kind of enjoyed it, overall I didn't think it was that great and I was left kind of disappointed. So fair warning, while I am going to talk about things I enjoyed, most of this video is me talking about things I did not like. I would probably give the movie as a whole a 5.5 or 6 out of 10. Even though I didn't enjoy the first movie all that much, I do feel like I really have the potential to like it more in the future. We just have to see with all 5 of the movies coming out. That's going to be it for my non-spoiler section because I have so much to talk about. So if you haven't seen Fantastic Beasts, go take a look, see what you think, come back and we can discuss it, but bye non-spoiler people. So the first thing I noticed about Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them is something that I feel is really weird. I feel like nobody's going to agree with me on this, but I feel like in the beginning of the movie there was not a lot of dialogue. They definitely had a more dialogue-packed ending, but in the beginning I feel like we had so many moments of silence, and all I kept thinking was, this is where I'm meant to be learning about the characters, and I feel like nobody's really talking, and it wasn't that enjoyable in the beginning, specifically because I feel like people just weren't talking enough. I do think that the action scenes and the CGI were done fabulously. Like anytime the Obscurus was around and was breaking apart the streets of New York City, or when all of the creatures came out of Newt's case and broke down that building and set it on fire or whatever, and then Newt put it all back together and you just see bricks flying from all over the place. It was all done so well. I was really impressed with the special effects in the movie, and it made the magic feel so real and authentic, which was definitely one of my favorite parts about it. Now, while one of my favorite scenes was at the bank when Newt and Jacob are both sitting there because Newt is looking for his Niffler, I do feel like the use of magic in this movie was really careless. Like I said, this was one of my favorite scenes. It was really funny and it kept me entertained, but I just couldn't stop thinking about the fact that I'm like, Newt is doing all of this magic in front of no mages and he doesn't really seem to care. He literally accues Jacob and then apparates with him, and he's just like, oh well, just another no mage I have to obliviate. I can't even say that it's because they're in America that things are different, because Newt is from Britain and all of the adults in Harry Potter, they know that you can't use magic in front of non-wizards, and they're very strict about this, so I don't understand why Newt just doesn't care. I just feel like it was so careless and out of character because literally every adult in Harry Potter is like, you can't use magic in front of muggles, so I felt like they just kind of sacrificed that in order to create an interesting scene, which I wasn't a fan of. It just felt really irresponsible on both the characters' part as well as the writers and producers. I do have to say the movie was a lot more humorous than I would have expected, which I really enjoyed that little surprise. While the Harry Potter series does have its funny moments, it's not like a comedy, and I feel like Fantastic Beasts had more comedy elements that were portrayed really well in the film. I just think all the funny moments were a really strong point for the movie, and I'm glad they incorporated more than I expected. I do have to say, I feel like the world building of Fantastic Beasts was really weak. It seems to me like everyone assumed that anyone who was watching Fantastic Beasts was going to have knowledge of Harry Potter, which is a big mistake. While Fantastic Beasts and Harry Potter do take place in the same world, you can't just assume anyone who goes to see Fantastic Beasts is going to have prior knowledge of Harry Potter. Other than it being the same world and having a few references, this is totally separate from the Harry Potter film octology, and I just feel like it really needed to be expanded more to reinforce that this is the wizarding world, especially because we are in a completely different time period than the Harry Potter world. Obviously there's going to be a lot of changes attributed to that, but we're also in a completely new culture that we have no prior knowledge of unless you read whatever was Ilvermorny. There's so many differences that are just like glossed over. Like, I don't really know much about Makusa despite the fact that we spent some time there. I don't really know how their government works. Apparently they have different and more strict laws, like you can't even befriend no mages, let alone actually marry them. I just really felt disconnected from the world in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, which is really disappointing because I am so connected with the wizarding world that has already been established, and it just didn't come through this film. It left me with a lot of questions of confusion, which is the opposite of what I want to leave a movie from. I want to leave with theories and questions about what's going to happen, not questions about what I just paid $13 to see. While I already stated that one of my favorite scenes had to do with the Niffler in the bank, the Niffler was like my favorite character. It was just so cute and funny, and like it felt very sassy, and I just loved its attitude. I love how it was just constantly trying to get away from Newt, and another one of my favorite scenes is when Jacob and Newt are off to Central Park and they just find the Niffler in the jewelry store and he's just like standing there hoping that Newt doesn't see him. Oh my god, it was so funny. And I honestly think, like, as a character and a personality, the Niffler was the best part. Now let's talk about the character. So obviously I really loved the character of Newt. I think he has a lot of potential and I'm sad to know that he's not going to be the main character for all of the films, but I am really excited to learn more about him. Though, like I said, I feel like I still don't know enough about him, even though I spent 2.5 hours watching all of this unfold with him as the main protagonist. I did see a headcanon that somebody said that they thought that Newt was on the autism spectrum because of his inability to make eye contact, his comfort with animals compared to humans, and one scene that really struck out to me that makes me want to support this theory is when they're in the Makusa trial and Newt is sentenced to death and they take away his case with all of the creatures inside. He just keeps repeating over and over again, don't hurt them, they're not dangerous, please don't hurt my creatures, they're not dangerous, and he gets really locked on to the idea that his creatures are being taken away from him. And while my mother has worked with special needs kids for basically all of my life, I've come in contact with a lot of individuals who do suffer from autism, and that getting locked on, unable to think about anything else other than this thing being taken away from you is pretty common. So I feel like that headcanon does have some foundation in the content of the film, and I would be really happy to see it, although honestly, I feel like nobody in that film production has the guts to kind of form that representation, but we'll see. I just feel like Newt's character could have so much more substance than what was shown in that first movie, and I just hope it expands to something great. Another favorite character of mine was Queenie. I loved her so much. I like how she doesn't really care for the laws concerning no matches and she's still interested in Jacob, and I really love their relationship, but I'll talk about Jacob in a second. I do feel like they were kind of trying to emulate Luna Lovegood a little bit. Like, Queenie has that same airy, carefree, I don't really mind that I'm a little weird. She was just flawless. I loved her so much. The one issue I had with her character is the fact that she is a legilimens. Now, in the Harry Potter world that's already established, we have kind of been introduced to legilimency as this practice skill. It's something that you can learn and become better at, and it is also something that you choose to practice. In all of the current content we have about Harry Potter, there is nothing that suggests either Snape, Dumbledore, or Voldemort, our 3 known legilimens, have the power to listen to people's thoughts all the time. And now we have Queenie, who makes it seem like she can always hear thoughts, kind of like an Edward Cullen sort of thing, where she listens to people's thoughts without really intending to, and I don't know why these two things are so different. It also seemed like Queenie was kind of born with it, like she didn't practice to be a legilimens and it wasn't a skill that she pursued. It kind of just seemed like this is something that she was born with. This is one of the first inconsistencies that I found to the already established wizarding world, and while you can definitely say that Fantastic Beasts and Harry Potter are indeed 2 separate stories, the world is essentially the same, and when you are creating a spin-off or an extension of the world, you can't just change the magic system. And we're gonna be talking about that later. Another favorite character is Jacob. I think out of the main cast, Jacob was my favorite. I just love the way that he was inserted into the wizarding world. I mean, at first he's taken aback, he's like, this can't be real, but he very quickly warms up to it and comes to love the wizarding world and all of Newt's creatures, and is really afraid at the thought of kind of missing out on this and not remembering that any of it exists. I love that he is a baker and he just wants to make pastries for his grandmother. Jacob is honestly one of the most genuine characters I think I have ever been introduced to in film. I love him with all of my heart. He is such a sweetheart, and I really hope we get more of him in these sequels. One of my favorite Jacob moments in the movie is when Newt just like hops out of bed and goes into his suitcase, and Jacob just goes, ha! And he does it later when they have the giggle water, but I just thought it was so funny, and like it really brightened up my mood. I also love how near the end, even though he has lost his memories, he starts making the pastries in the shape of the creatures, and I think it's so cute. And just, Jacob Kowalski deserves the world, and I love him so much. The one character I was not crazy about was Tina. I know that her character is going to be great, and I'm sure I'm going to love her more in the sequels. It's just the way that she came off just was off-putting. She was kind of annoying and intrusive, and I wasn't a big fan of her. We do know that down the line, Newt Scamander marries a Porpentina, and they later have a family of Scamanders, so I'm sure that this little bit of romance we got at the end of Fantastic Beasts is going to delve into something more, but I am really excited because I think I do have the potential to really like Tina as a character. So now we're going to talk about the Obscurus or the Obscurials. My first thought when this was introduced into the movie was this feels very out of place in the Harry Potter world. And before you start commenting on this, just wait a moment and let me explain. I can't really pinpoint why I originally felt this way. I mean, you know, anytime I was reading Harry Potter for the first time and we had a new concept or a new idea, new character, new creature, everything felt right and it felt like it fit, and it could just be because I'm an older consumer of media now that I'm like, hey, wait, I feel like this isn't right. But yes, for the most part, I felt like the concept of a child who has to suppress their magic becomes this obscurial thing that can just transform into like shadows and wreak havoc uncontrollably definitely did not feel like the wizarding world, not even just Harry Potter, but the actual wizarding world. It just didn't seem like an extension of magic that seemed logical, especially because we have so many Muggle-borns that are put in situations where they might have to suppress their magic, and I think they said there was only like one in the last century that Newt helped out. It just seemed really improbable to me. I literally felt this way up until about 10 minutes ago when I was watching reviews to make sure that I had all of the content I wanted to discuss in my review. A few people on the internet were theorizing that the Obscurus is not something that's actually new to us, we just don't recognize it as an Obscurus. They mentioned the fact that Ariana Dumbledore was a wizard. She wasn't a squib, she was a wizard who had been tormented by these muggles when she was a child, and therefore she chose to suppress her magic, and then one day her magic explodes and her mother dies. We all know this story, but we haven't exactly thought of it anything other than her just being a wizard. So there is a potential that Ariana Dumbledore could be an Obscurus, and if this is the connection they're making, I am all for it. That is exactly the kind of little Easter eggs and references and connections that I want to see from a spin-off like Fantastic Beasts. I would be so pleased if this is the route that they are going, but if they don't, and this is just like a new thing where apparently people can turn into shadows, I'm not going to be as pleased, but I'm really holding out for the fact that it's related to Ariana Dumbledore, and that plays into it much later when we have the whole battle of Grindelwald and Dumbledore at the end of the film series. One thing I need to mention really quickly in this film is diversity and representation. First of all, this takes place in I think 1926. I'm pretty sure that's in the midst of the Harlem Renaissance, and Fantastic Beasts takes place in Harlem, if you didn't know. And it's all white people. Why? Yes, we have a black female president, and while that is great, and that's something I picked up immediately, and I was like, hey, this is awesome, not only do we not see a lot of her, she doesn't play a major role, she also doesn't seem to be the nicest person, so I'm not exactly counting that as great representation of the Harlem Renaissance in the 1920s. Also, we have this person, I don't exactly know her role in this film series, but I believe she is like a congresswoman or some part of the Chinese government or someplace in Asia, and I believe her name is Ya Zhao, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly. Please feel free to let me know the correct pronunciation in the comments, but this woman has been named Ya Zhao, which in Mandarin translates to Asia. We have a character from Asia named Asia. There's a lot I could say about this, but all I want to say is just, really, out of every single Mandarin word, you pick Asia. It's careless, and that's all I'm really going to say about that. Speaking of MACUSA and the governments and whatnot, I felt that the scene where Tina and Newt are sentenced to death was really overdramatic. While I do understand that they broke wizarding law and they exposed magic and a no-mage died as a result of it, immediate execution, really? It's already been made clear that Britain and America have two totally different justice systems when it comes to the wizarding world, because you have Bellatrix Lestrange, who killed and tortured multiple people, just locked up in prison, and then you have two people by accident who caused an issue, and they're gonna die like immediately, like no trial, no paperwork, nothing. And then I'm just like, why is this room of burning water their method of execution? I mean, I understand that Avada Kedavra is illegal, but it's just, it's so much quicker, and like there would be so little problems, and they wouldn't have escaped if they had actually used Avada Kedavra. Let's be real. Can't have two stories about a boy who lived. But just the whole fact of them being like drawn into sitting in this chair of water that would eventually burn them up very slowly was so weird, and like that was another thing that felt very out of place in my opinion. I just felt that there were so many other ways that they could have gone with it, and once again they were just going for whatever was the most flashy. Though the scene after they escape, when Newt and Tina are running away from the room and trying to escape MACUSA, and then Queenie and Jacob show up with Newt's case, and all of the ministry or MACUSA employees are like fighting, and they're just running through that underground thing. It was a really cool scene. I can't even verbalize it because I'm just seeing it in my mind, and it was like, that was epic. So they kind of made up for it, but not really. Another scene I really enjoyed was the scene with the demi-guys in Macy's with that giant snake bird thing that I don't remember the name of. I thought it was really cool how they showed the demi-guys' vision of what was gonna happen when whoever it was took a step forward, and then they sent a bell, and then everything went crazy. I thought it was so cool that they actually showed us this happening 2 seconds before it did. And then the whole scene of that giant snake bird like filling up Macy's and breaking everything, and them having to trick them into a teapot with a cricket so that they would fill up just the space of a teapot. That was really genius on my part, and that was definitely the types of scenes that I wanted to see more. That was cool and I really liked it. So now we're nearing the end of the film, where this presence of Grindelwald is growing, because in the beginning we just have that intro of newspaper clippings and we literally don't hear about it until the very end. The thing I do want to say here is I feel like in this one film franchise, we have two very different stories competing for attention. We have Newt's story with the beasts and with Tina and Jacob and Queenie, and we also have this rising of Grindelwald. At the present moment, at the end of the first film, the only connection we have between these two stories is that they are occurring at the same time, and that Newt is the one who kind of reveals Grindelwald to be Grindelwald and gets him locked up. That's really the only connection they have. Other than that, I feel like these stories are totally separate, and personally I kind of would have preferred two separate franchises where we could have really focused on one and then focused on the other. I'm sure that they will tie in together later on. It just felt like this first movie was not the strongest in relation of connecting these two stories, and I just hope that improves. I definitely knew that Grindelwald was coming. I had heard about all of the Johnny Depp stuff, so that wasn't a shock to me, though I wasn't expecting it to be Graves. I thought that was a great plot twist. When Graves handed Credence the Deathly Hallows symbol, I was like, oh my gosh, he's a supporter, that's crazy, and then it turns out that he actually is him, which I thought was a really interesting plot twist. We also have Credence, who comes out to be the Obscurus, which I thought was another really interesting plot twist, because the entire movie they are setting it up to be Modesty, and it's not Modesty, it's Credence. Now, I did see this movie twice in theaters, and I had heard about this scene after the first time, so when I went to see it the second time, I was looking for it, but apparently after Credence kind of explodes and everyone thinks that he's dead and that the Obscurus is gone, apparently one little wisp of whatever the Obscurus is made out of got away and Newt sees it. So everyone's kind of theorizing that Newt knows that Credence is alive and he's going to go after him and try and find him and fix this and separate the Obscurus from Credence. I personally didn't catch up, but I think that sets it up for a really interesting sequel. And then we have the reveal that Graves is Grindelwald. Couple questions here. My first question is, why does Gellert Grindelwald look so much like an unattractive version of Valentine Morgenstern? That was all I could think of while I was watching that movie. I was like, it literally looks like Valentine with light eyes. My second question is, I want to know how Grindelwald was concealed as Graves for this long period of time. I don't believe we ever see Graves drink anything to suggest and kind of foreshadow that he's using Polyjuice Potion like we did in Harry Potter with Mad-Eye Moody. I just don't know how it worked, which leaves a lot of questions as to how is this new way that people can conceal themselves and turn into somebody else, because we already have so many problems from the Polyjuice Potion that still aren't answered, and now we're either using that but not explaining that we're using that, or we're using this new form of magic that also isn't explained. Another question I have is, they know Grindelwald is a powerful dark wizard. They know that his intention is to destroy no mages and to conquer the world as a wizard, and so I'm just wondering why they are taking him off to jail. I don't know if they explicitly say it, but I feel like the intention is that they are carting him off to jail, maybe to interrogate him, maybe to put him on trial, but I don't think they're immediately planning to execute execute him, because otherwise we would have to get this announcement in the sequel pretty much immediately that Grindelwald has escaped if they were planning on executing him so soon after the events of the first film, if that makes sense. So my question here is, why is it that a dark wizard who is known to kill people and has killed people and has done all of this crap internationally, why is he being carted off to jail when they literally tried to kill Tina and Newt in like 10 seconds? Man, things are unexplained, and I need explanations. So the last thing I want to talk about is an inconsistency that bothered the hell out of me. So we have this scene in the beginning of the film when Jacob is in Newt's suitcase with him, and Newt is explaining how he found this creature who he believes their venom has memory erasing properties, and that little vial he collected comes back into play here. So Newt sends Frank the Thunderbird up into the sky to make it rain, and he mixes it with this obliviate potion that he created, and all of a sudden everyone who has just witnessed all of these events of all this magic and obscurials, they forget everything. How convenient, right? Conveniency, while it is probably one of my least favorite things in media, especially with Harry Potter, because they are so annoying with convenience, that's not even my problem. My problem is how even this rain thing doesn't work the way it's supposed to. Hear me out. So in the film, we've established that it wipes the memories of everyone who has memories of this magic that they've just come in contact with, and you don't actually need to be in contact with the rain. We have scenes of people inside who are starting to lose their memories of it, so you don't need to contact it. They've shown us that. So if that's true, we have to question why nobody who is actually in the subway tunnel where Credence was has been affected. Are they suggesting that it can't penetrate underneath the ground because that means that anyone who was on the subways at that moment or in the basement of a building would not have been obliviated and magic would still be exposed? So maybe it can penetrate underground, but it just can't affect wizards. But Jacob the No-Maj is also in the subway tunnels, and he wasn't obliviated. But then we get above ground where Tina, Queenie, Jacob, and Newt are underneath a little awning with the entrance to a subway behind them. All four of them still have their memories and they're still talking, so they're no longer underneath the ground, and they're actually out in the open. It's not even like a wall is keeping them inside, so why aren't they obliviated? So now the only semi-logical theory I can really come up with is that if you have prior knowledge of the magical world, whether you are a wizard who is actually involved in the wizarding world, or if you're someone like Jacob who had knowledge of the wizarding world before all of this destruction caused by the Obscurus, then you aren't necessarily obliviated just because you're above ground. But then when Jacob goes out into the rain and he starts losing his memories, Queenie comes out with an umbrella coming out of her wand to kiss him, so she's intentionally not letting herself go in contact with the rain. So is this new theory now that apparently if you have prior knowledge of the wizarding world, you do need to have contact, but it can erase your memories? This obliviate rain thing was just so ridiculous to me. Like, that was all I could think of in that scene, was just because it made no sense as to why some people were affected more greatly than others. They put it in for convenience, but they didn't expand it to make sense to the world, so I can't really appreciate that. But then we get a little bit later in the movie when Jacob is normal, he's a no-maj, he doesn't remember anything from the wizarding world, and he has his bake shop. Queenie comes in, and we have this moment between the two of them where Jacob smiles and like you feel like he kind of recognizes her. This is another issue. The only true canon instance we have of anyone somewhat breaking the Obliviate charm is when Voldemort tortures Bertha Jorkins into telling him about the Triwizard Tournament. Obliviate is a really complex spell, and we don't have a lot of information as to how it can be relieved a little bit, but I just can't get behind the fact that it can be changed by the mere face of somebody that you've known for a couple of days. Obviously, that last moment between Jacob and Queenie does not necessarily outright say that Jacob totally remembers everything and his memories are completely restored, but it does leave us to kind of imply that he has some kind of memory associated with her face because he smiles and he's not just puzzled as to why he feels like he knows her. Obliviate doesn't work that way, and it's inconsistent with the Harry Potter series, and they didn't really explain any of it. They just kind of throw all of this in here and expected us to go with it. So that's really all I have to say on Fantastic Beasts and where to find them as a film. I did enjoy the movie. I felt it had some really strong points, and there were a lot of scenes I really enjoyed, but there were also a lot of inconsistencies. There were things that didn't make sense, and there was just a lot that I wasn't a fan of. For the rest of the film series, I will be seeing all of them. I'm definitely hopeful that they're gonna fix some of these problems. For now, I'm just here, and I'm gonna say I enjoyed it. It was not a perfect movie by any any means, and I just really hope that they can make those improvements and less inconsistencies to the world that's been established for almost 2 decades now. Let me know in the comments of this video what were your thoughts on Fantastic Beasts and where to find them, because I would love to know and discuss this film with you guys. But that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon for a new video. Bye!